Yeah, this is our second event from the Product Management Club, and this is a very special event because there's a lot of content online about these fancy frameworks, these fancy ways of doing things, but then there's very few content online that talks about the fundamentals of product management. Really, the fundamentals of the profession, it's so hard to come by, and we have very special guests here, Tim Grabacki and Silvia Grabacki. They're a couple, if you did not assume that already. They've been married for over 38 years now, and they used to do product management before it was cool. They used to do product management before PMs became CEOs, and then it kind of became the trendy field for software engineers. So it's such a pleasure to have them here. So let's welcome them with a huge round of applause. So I'm going to start with introductions about Tim and Silvia, and then we'll get into the questions, and then there's going to be a rapid fire. And then if we have time, we'll do audience Q&A. If not, Tim and Silvia will be here for a few minutes after the event, so you can ask your questions after the event as well. So here's an introduction about Tim. So Tim started his career as a design engineer for the first generation of cellular phones at Motorola. So he's very responsible for whatever we have in our pockets today.
That's me.
He then had a number of roles in international systems engineering, vertical market strategy, and international strategy in Asia. He holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology, or IIT, an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, and also an MS in HCI, Human-Computer Interaction, from DePaul. So that's Tim. And let's talk about Silvia now. So Silvia was the director of secure products at Motorola Solutions. So she also started her career as a design engineer working on two-way radios. And then she also designed the first cellular networks in South Korea and became the manager of international systems engineering. She holds a bachelor's in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she also has the CISSP certification. So let's get started with the questions then. So Tim and Silvia, of course, thank you so much for being here. The first question that I have for you is product management can mean different things to different people. One company can do product management in way X, and another company can do it in way Y. But to kick things off, how would you describe the role of a PM in like 2 to 3 sentences? Anyone can.
Okay. So the product manager is, and most people wouldn't agree to this, but to me is like the CEO of the product. It should be the one that works on the strategy of the product and is responsible all the way until the product is discontinued at some point. That is, and a good product manager should be the one that defines all aspects of the products along the life cycle of the product.
Awesome. So there's this thing, mini CEO of the product, so that's what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah.
CEO of the product.
A CEO of the product. Yeah.
If I can add to that, you're a CEO of a product that has responsibility for all the details. You're not there telling the engineers what to do. You're working with the engineers. You're working with the salespeople. You're setting up all the nitty-gritty details, the parts obsolescence. So it's not like you're in some office making these decisions somewhere.
Yeah.
You're doing the work. So it's all aspects of what relates to that product. So
Yeah, and it's very hard because most companies don't respect or view product management that way. Especially technical companies, believe that the engineer is king. That the engineer gets to make all the decisions. So we can talk more about that when we get to the skills. But it has its huge challenges because of being fairly new profession, and something. And we'll talk more as you go through the other questions.
Yeah. But Tim brought up a great point. It's about being both on the higher level and the lower level of things.
Very much so.
So both of you studied electrical engineering, and then both of you all started your careers as design engineers.
Right.
So there are many transferable skills between engineering and product, like, staying detail-oriented, analytical thinking, breaking down huge problems, and then solving each one of them. But I want to ask about the skills that you had to unlearn when you moved to product from engineering.
Yeah. So part of the transition that Silvia and I did was moving from a bench engineer, as we called it back in the day, to product management. We had a step in the middle there. It's called system engineering. So we were designing communication systems for users, all over the world. So as Silvia, as Nitin mentioned about Silvia, she was designing, cellular systems for Korea. I was designing systems in the Middle East. And so you had to take the Motorola products and put them together into a solution. So we got to see the other side of the products than being just on the bench, with a soldering iron or testing things out or working with the factory. It was a much broader perspective. And I think that's the issue, is that you have to move from what part of the product that you're working on as an engineer to seeing how it's actually being used.
Yeah, and I think that is when I started learning about myself and what I wanted to do, because I started as a design engineer. I mean, I really had a bench and a temperature chamber, and I was responsible for 2 transistors and 5 resistors that I needed to make sure that they worked, and they were the synthesizer for the radio. And I had no idea how the radio worked. I mean, I knew my little circuit and how it needed to behave, or the temperature and everything that I was told to do. And I said, this is not for me. I need to know more. So I just wanted to get to the point of knowing how the radio worked, let alone, And then when I got the other job, it was more, it really expanded the knowledge, and then really got to know how the products worked and how systems works. And then I really enjoyed that. And I like, wow, this is where I really wanted to be. So a lot of it is depends. Some people are very happy, having 2 transistors and a bunch of resistors and sitting on a bench all day. But you have to learn if that's what you want to do, or do you want to do something different. It's my audio?
No, it's just my mic. Okay. Sure. That sounds interesting. But okay, so we talked about the skills that you had to unlearn. But what were some strengths that you thought helped you move from engineering to product? What were some skills that you still had to use while you moved from engineering to product?
Well, the technical skills were still huge, and being in a technical company, still having the technical skills was a huge foundation that helped us to be successful. So, but you have to get out of the technical skills from the fact of it's just technology to more using those skills to figure out how can the product be used by a customer. So you cannot translate your technical skills in a different view. You use them to understand how the product works, and then be able to talk about the product, talk to customers, and share that knowledge, so the customers then can learn about your product.
You had to be credible. And so I think it helped us, having that technical base, again, made us credible when we ended up talking to engineers later on in various roles, that no, we were there. We have done this. And we knew how the factory worked, because we spent time I certainly spent enough time in the factory, making sure our products could get out the door. So you had to build that base of knowledge, that experience that you could draw upon later. And it's also very serendipitous, right? You don't know what you're going to get into. It's the things that we learned on the bench, you never thought you'd draw upon later on, because that's just what your job was at the time. But so when you say you have to unlearn, it's like you had to unlearn that you had to just be focused on this. Your perspective had to be much greater.
It's so cool that you mentioned you were going to the factory, because there's this thing, I don't know if you saw this, but DoorDash expects PMs to deliver food themselves at least once a month. Because most PMs are like happy sitting in the office and all that. So it's really cool that you brought that up.
And getting out to see customers was a key part to it.
Yeah.
Because you have to learn how to talk that language. You have to be customer savvy. We saw bad engineers interact with customers. That was bad. And so you had to learn how to listen, and active listening is a key part to that.
I think that's why companies never let engineers talk to their customers. It's mostly the PMs that do that.
No, at Motorola, the engineers talked a lot with the customers. And I think one of the other things is that the customers that you end up interacting with are also very technical, because if you're working, let's say that they're going to buy a new product or they're going to buy a new system, who are you working with? You're working with a system manager that maybe manages that system. You're working with the very technical people that are making the decisions of what the users need. So sometimes the customer organization that we work with is the one that's talking to their users. We might not be talking directly to the users. You're talking more to the people that are going to make the decisions. So they're very technical people. So coming back to Tim's point of having that credibility, you have to be able to talk to them and explain why they need to make a decision of product A versus product B, to help them then be able to explain why they have selected your product or your system versus somebody else. So
Remember, you're part of a business, and you're in the selling mode as well. It's not just a technical solution that, of course, is the best thing ever. You have to show the customer why that is. And then it's also competition. Why is it better than the competitors' products?
Sure, thanks. So you all have seen the evolution of the profession from the 90s to the 2000s to the 2010s and all that. Of course, there's a lot of technological change that has happened from internet, from mobile, cloud computing, and all that. So I'm curious to know, what do most product managers get wrong about the profession? What do they not seem to really understand?
I think that was yours.
yeah, that was mine. So a lot of it, and this was even very common in Motorola, the product managers thought that knowing the product was the role of the engineer. So they actually, many times, the product managers didn't even know their own products. So they will go see a customer, but they will always bring an engineer along with them. So the engineer also got more to say to the customer than the product manager did. And I think that happened as the evolution of product management, because many years ago, Motorola didn't even have product managers. I mean, or if they were there, what they did was to work on the model numbers and make sure that the product could ship out of the factory. So engineers did the strategy, they decided what they were going to do. So the product managers, when they join an organization like that, they just kind of said, okay, well, if they know it all, I don't need to know it. So it has been a challenge for the product management organization to say, no, we are these mini CEOs. We get to decide the overall, or work as the organization, but lead the organization in making these decisions of what the product needs to be done with external input. Not just you engineers sitting in your desk there knowing, thinking that you know everything or what needs to be done. So I think that's what I've seen as one of the things that product managers need to continue to do, is to make sure that they don't give up their role as being able to know the products and being able to know enough to be able to set the strategy and the direction for the products and where they want to go. The other thing is, and I think Tim touched on this a little bit, is that product management can be really exciting. You can do all the strategy and the market research and go to conferences and meet customers and do all the fun stuff. But then there's a lot of stuff that is not the exciting part. It's like when you have to work with the factory and setting up all the ordering structure. Even though you could make it fun, because you have to decide how your pricing is and what your options and how you're going to make the money long term. So you could turn some of those things that are boring into strategic decisions that you can make. What happens when there's a stop ship? there's something technical wrong with the product, the factory cannot ship it. You're the one that's going to get the phone calls, from sales. Why can my product not ship? Customers are upset. What are you doing about it? So you have to be able to take all of that as part of your role and use it as learning experiences. Hey, there was a stop ship. Why did the stop ship happen? What was wrong with the product? Could we have done something in the front end to make sure that that didn't happen later on? So product managers sometimes don't know that they also have to do a lot of the nitty gritty and get yelled at and be the ones on the other side of the phone.
Did you just say product managers get yelled at?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
By customers, by management,
By salespeople.
But salespeople, something is like, why did you do it this way? We cannot ship it in the factory, or it's not structured properly. Oh, yeah, you can, yes.
The worst is getting yelled at by customers.
Yeah.
When you have yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing is that you also have to understand where a product manager fits in the organization. And so this is where I'll make my commercial for the Pragmatic Institute, the whole pragmatic marketing framework that's been around for a while and gone through different iterations. But if you see all the boxes on that framework, some of which you, as a product manager in that company, in that organization, whatever, will have responsibility for parts of it. Other people will have responsibility for the others. And you say, well, which ones am I supposed to be doing? Which ones can I do? Which ones are things that aren't being done that maybe I could grow into? Classic one is win-loss analysis. Why has a customer, chosen you over someone else, or vice versa? Was it pricing? Was it features? Whatever. That adds a lot of value. A lot of people don't do that. So is that something you can do? But so you have to think of, oh, if someone is already doing that, then maybe I do something else. Again, there's many different aspects of product management. All of those that can be done, maybe are not always being done.
Yeah, the pragmatic framework, I've seen that, but if you like explain it briefly in like a minute or two.
Oh, gee. Pragmatic marketing, as it was originally called, was one of the first places that looked at product management and all the different tasks within the role of a product manager. And so all the way from very strategic things about setting product strategy or even technology strategy and driving engineering teams or research and development engineers in a certain direction, all the way to doing demonstrations or making marketing campaigns. There's probably 20 to 30 boxes on this framework, of which are more strategic versus tactical, as well as early on in the process, all the way to end of life. So I would suggest you look that up and say, where can I fit? And it's very dependent on your organization and who's doing what already or what's not being done already.
Sure. We'll also send a link to the pragmatic framework to all the registrants
Okay,
after the event.
Okay.
So my next question is, when you interviewed PMs back in the day, what were some red flags that were immediately like reasons for rejection?
Yeah, so let me talk about that because I learned a lot hiring. So since I was a very technical person myself, when I had to hire product managers, my first inclination was to hire very technical product managers. And then within Motorola, some of the people that I liked were what we call the system architects, because the system architects were not bench engineers, but they worked a lot in the requirements definition, so they had a higher level perspective than somebody that was doing coding or sitting on a bench. Some of them became good product managers. A lot of them couldn't get away from just being technical people, and so I think even within that role, I needed to do a better job of understanding, are they going to be able to move out, like what you were saying asking us earlier, can you move out of that being that technical person that only thinks about technical issues? And like I said, some did well, some didn't. Then I had an opportunity when I was, my last job, when I was a director, I had the whole team, from architects, design engineers, and then product managers. And I had an opportunity to hire a bunch of new product managers. And I went the other way. So I hired a bunch of fresh outs out of college. And
Curious, was it a technical degree or a business degree?
so I hired 2 people with a business degree, and I hired 1 person with a technical degree. But then this is where you realize that there's so many other skill sets that they need to have. So 2 of the business people that I hired were very confident on themselves, had a really great communication skills, and they had a willingness to learn. So they did actually very well because they used those capabilities that they had to then learn the things that they didn't know, or to work very cooperatively with engineer, but still hold their credibility and being able to say, no, ultimately these are my decisions, so this is what we need to do, or I'm going to do the analysis to convince you that this is what we need to do. So in this case, their confidence and their communication skills overrode some of the other lacks they had. 1 person in particular had a business degree. She also had a master's degree, but she wasn't as confident, and her communication skills were not very good. And this person was never able to overcome and get the credibility with engineering to say, I am the one in charge here, this is what are we going to go do. So I think you're also asking me, what are so the green flags, or is in an interview, can they communicate well? Have they done things, like one of the ladies that I ended up hiring that did very well, she had been very active in organizing events and doing things. So she had a lot of very, she felt confident that she could do all of these things, and she carried that into her product management job. So, and this person, 1 left Motorola, he's running his own business. The other one has had other jobs within Motorola, and she's doing extremely well and growing in her career. So, and then the one that didn't do very well actually left the company. So I have been all over the place. So I think what I can tell you is that you have to have confidence, make sure you work on your, on your communication skills, your presentation skills. How do you put forth a good argument on why things need to be done, and that will overcome maybe not having perfect technical skills, or if you do, even better, but use your technical skills in the proper manner, not to go solve engineering problems, go solve customer problems. So.
Sure, that's a great point. Don't solve engineering problems, solve customer problems.
Very, very much so. So a couple of things just to build on what Silvia said. One would be, as a red flag, not listening. You have to be a very active listener, and just in general to be successful as a product manager. But in an interview, if they're not listening, that arrogance, because that's what it would be, that ain't going to work with anybody. And so it's a willingness to be present and being active, and as a green flag, someone that can connect the dots between technology and a customer need. I've seen this problem. It came up with this. In whatever way. I mean, it doesn't always need to be technical, but that you can put together 2 pieces and say, here's what needs to happen differently. And so it's that kind of ingenuity, innovation, whatever, as simple as it may be, just shows that you can get out of your own little space into something larger.
Yeah, and don't make up stuff.
Don't make up stuff.
I had one guy that sat on my desk, and everything that I brought up, he had done, or he had a solution, and that he was just making up all this stuff, and you're like, it's like, I'm done, I don't need to listen to you anymore. I mean, go ahead. Is that okay?
Be a good listener and understand the problem. Should the product manager be from the development since the inception of the product, or should he come after the product is mature? I have a question. When would it be all right to have a product manager?
So I'll repeat the question here. Is it all right or when is the right time for a product manager to get involved with a product, at the inception or sometime later. And the issue is that you get all kinds, because as you get hired into a role, you don't know whether somebody's just left the role and you are to finish off the price pages and the marketing literature to launch a product, or you're way at the beginning. Products are being developed all the time, so you got to just think of it just as that continuous development stream of products. So you don't never know exactly where you're going to be. I would be very reluctant to say a product manager that's unfamiliar with the product or the technology or the customers would be good at the beginning. That they need to learn, and they need to be learning, especially if you're not, conversant with that technology or those customers. The great way to learn is on a product launch. So it's better to be at the end. If you're really smart and very experienced, then it's better at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree with that, because when I hire new people, they usually started on a product that was already in the market, so they could learn the product without having to start all, because they don't have any background to say what the new product should look like. But if they start with a mature product, they get to learn what's going on. They need to learn who the salespeople are, who the customers are. You kind of have to have all of that background before you can be good at your job or defining the strategy. So don't be afraid about starting with a mature product, and use that as a, as a good place to start. And then when the new product comes down the line, then your manager will be like, oh yeah, he or she is ready. Let's put them to start doing the front end and doing the strategic, decisions.
Let me jump in. Another way to look at it is you're generally not working on brand new products. You're working on a new version, and whether that's software or hardware, right? There's something there. You're coming up with the next version. We're going to add this feature or add this capability or turn the product blue. Whatever it is, something's already there to build on. You want me to keep answering?
Is that okay with you?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, since the product is mature, so they would focus more on the market strategy, I would say, right? Would that be the right case? Am I wrong? Or would it be more on the
So if the product is mature, are you just working on market strategy? Not necessarily, because you could be looking at a new market. We want to take it from like the things that we did with Motorola, police and fire, and you're trying to do something for ambulance. It's a distinctly different market. Or you could, or in a software product, it's the same thing. It could be taking a different direction or adding a feature that nobody ever thought of and said, gee, I wonder if this would be a good idea to add this feature to the product. You never know how complicated it would be.
Yeah, or a mature product, you could be looking at it and saying, the software in this product or the user interface is going to be obsolete, in a few years. And then you can then start thinking about okay, if this product is going to be obsolete, because that's what you have to manage when you have an older product. When is it going to, when are you not going to be able to manufacture it anymore or be able to ship it? So you could be looking at all of those things as you learn about the product, and then you start working with customers and say, hey, if I'm going to have to replace this product, should it still be a computer that sits on a desk, or should it be a handheld now? So you can start doing all of that strategic thinking on what's going to happen 3 or 4 years or 5 years down the road when you have to replace a product. And it does take you that long, especially for complex technical products. You're not going to replace them in 1 year. It's going to take you 3 to 5 years to replace something. And that's what a lot of the product managers in my team did. They started with a mature product, and then they got to work on the next generation one, but they had a foundation, and then they got to make the decisions of what the next product was going to be. And they really enjoyed doing that.
Shubham also had a question.
I have a question regarding, if someone joining a mature product, how important is the domain experience? If they are building some finance product or some software product, how important is the
So, and this is the challenge that I had with Motorola. No one has that knowledge of our products. Unless you hire maybe a customer, that is using them or the system manager from somewhere. So the domain expertise, at least for my situation, it wasn't there. I needed to kind of look at other skill sets and the ability for them to learn about the products. But they needed to have these other skill sets that it was what's going to make them successful. Because then, no one knew what a key management facility is or a key variable loader. I mean, no one has a clue, But you will be the people that we will be looking at hiring. And so, to me, the domain expertise wasn't as critical for me.
And so it's really a question then of how well can this person learn? I've worked in other industries, and domain expertise was important or for the people I was looking for, because there was stuff that you could not teach. Like I had to hire a product manager for ATMs. The company I was working for at the time, they had none of that expertise, though many people thought they did. But I had to get a real person in there. And so there was no way I could bring somebody in and say, okay, now you're going to learn. So it really is very dependent on that. But Sylvia's right. Either the products that she was working on, secure products, or public safety customers here in the U.S. or international, chances are you're not going to have a lot of exposure to them, at least from a communications perspective, in a positive way. So.
I just have a follow-up.
No, please. That's what we're here for.
Go ahead.
I was just asking, if domain expertise is not, it can be learned, and what are the one or two skills you look for, other than communication? So a person is the right person, he's a quick learner or something, but how do you see that in a person, in just half an hour?
That's a great question. And I think a lot, you look at what they've done in the past, how they have maybe what organizations they've been involved with, what part-time jobs that they've had in the past. And yeah, and a lot of it is very subjective.
Very subjective.
Very subjective. And that's why I feel like I have made many mistakes, because it is a very subjective decision that you're making.
Can the person learn, and are they listening? In addition to the communication skills, but if the person cannot pick that kind of stuff up, I was turned down for a job at GE Medical, or actually I didn't even get past the interview, because GE Medical's product managers are doctors and nurses. I could say, I'm a good learner, I'm a fast learner. Chances are, I was never going to be able to contribute for months on the job, where that hiring manager was looking for somebody to fill her a spot on her team right then. So it's a tough call.
It's a tough one.
I'm curious, when did Motorola start the product management function, or were you all the first set of PMs there at Motorola?
So I bet I was there before you. This was back in the late 80s. And in product organizations, there was two roles, because remember, Motorola is a manufacturer. And so before software was a key deliverable, but there was product marketing people and business marketing people. The business marketing people dealt with forecasting into the factory. They would look at the orders, because a lot of things that Motorola did, at least in the systems business, was very long lead time. So they were feeding orders into the factory, looking at the orders, seeing what can be built, what they, very day-to-day, the job I'm glad I never had. In product marketing, it was doing the requirements, talking to customers, going to trade shows. And so it wasn't until sometime after the late 80s that it became a product management role. Similar to what was called product marketing, but then product marketing then was almost like in marketing communications.
Yeah, marketing communications, because we had a separate team that did the marketing communications, so that's all the creating the literature and going, setting up some of the show strategies and things like that. But even then, and we had some issues because the product managers were not involved in creating the benefit statements for the marketing organization, you know? So it was kind of like we had gaps into what was going on. So
So the late 80s were
That's probably when it started, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, and then it became a product. The product management was its own team, and so it was an organization of product managers that supported all the different technical teams. They were,
What had changed at Motorola during that late 80s was moving from product silos, where you had different product managers that had P&L responsibility as well as engineering responsibility, some control over the factory, to because engineers were not being used. Every product owner at the time just would keep doing their own thing, and so it was a classic. Nobody could make the change from individual products into systems, and that really changed. So there had to be a whole new development pipeline and grouping together for all engineers into not quite fungible assets, but people that knew software or knew hardware at various levels, and then they would be assigned into the next highest priority product, as opposed to the fiefdoms that were there prior to that. And so it was a major organizational P&L change within Motorola, very painful.
That's great to know. So the last question before we move to the rapid fire section is, so both of you worked in Asia and then, of course, the US. I'm curious to know if you've noticed any differences in the way products were built in Asia versus the US.
Yeah. So the way, at least the way Motorola did it, the manufacturing, when you say built in Asia, the manufacturing in Asia, specifically Penang, Malaysia, was the same as it was in Plantation, Florida, for example, or in Ireland, or in Taunusstein, Germany. You know, the engineering, manufacturing culture at Motorola is very, very strong. And so that was very commonplace. The differences in the market were significant, at least from my perspective, because I was also part of a global product team when I was in Asia. And the number one difference between the US and every place else is prices are so much higher in the US than anywhere else. So very much higher.
Oh, my
God,
God, yes.
Significantly higher than Asia, significantly higher than Europe. And so that's why Motorola's profits mostly came from the US.
yeah, so Tim was in a global size. I'm in Asia, but working on the local products, and I was a product manager on the Asia team. And so we had our own price book. So we had to create our own pricing strategy because we couldn't use the US pricing strategy. So, and we sold the products from Asia, and then we sold the products that supported Europe. And Europe also was lower price than the US. They has a different technology that we also sold in Europe. And then when we sold it in Asia, it was even lower price than Europe. So it just, we had to have our own strategic decisions on how we did the pricing.
And so when you did, these were global products, and one of the issues that you had is if a product was being built in Asia that could also be used in the US, you had all these gray market flows. So people would be buying things, distributors would be buying things in Asia, shipping them to the US. There was a big problem. Yeah. And so you end up having to come up with new model numbers. I led a product strategy to, actually made the radio green to be able to distinguish it from the stuff that was being sold in the US. Yeah. Just to be, because of the pricing differentials were so great.
It was,
Okay, cool. So,
but that's what made it fun, because we had to
It took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
There is fun in there.
Okay, so thanks for that. We're going to move to the rapid fire section, and then we're going to start with Silvia. And then, so the first question is, what's the one thing about product management that both of you disagree upon?
We have very extensive discussions on the know-how that a product manager needs to have about market research. And we can get into that later, but that's one of the ones that...
You?
No, it's market research, yeah. We've had this discussion for
we were like,
years.
do we talk about that? Do we talk about that?
Specifically on how much does a product manager need to know about to to objectively gather information from customers or from the market to be able to make a recommendation on product features, operation, pricing, whatever. And let's just say we have a difference of opinion on where that level is. So.
What side of the argument are you on?
I think a product manager needs significant market research capability.
Okay.
And I think a lot of it is Tim had more strategic type of roles. I've been more in operations. So I think that influences that. He wants to think about it more strategically. I'm more into like, okay, we need to get things done. We need to have all that input, but it's just the degrees of it. It's just, that's what it is.
So when you need to have so you can't just say, I've talked to 3 customers, this is what they want, this is what the product should be. You know, unless those are the 3 biggest customers you've got. You know, and then you could be a custom house, a job shop, whatever. But if you're trying to make a broader appeal, there is certain quantitative approach to this that.
And I'm not saying that it has to be 3 customers. It's that he has done market research for months on end. But so it's just, never mind. Let's move on.
Okay, so the second question is best software product that you've used.
It's going to be very silly, but it's the Harmony Entertainment controller, you know, for the home entertainment.
Yeah.
Because you guys probably don't remember this, but at the time we had the PS3, the DVD player, there was
As far as a CD player.
Oh, the CD player and the projector. And I didn't want to have 5 different controllers, you know, and then you could actually access Netflix, or you could pay a DVD, or you could pay a movie, or you could pay a game, you know. So with the controller, you went in there, you pick one thing, and then when you turn it on, it says, are all the devices on? And you could say, yes. And then when you turn it off, it said, are all the devices off? And then you could say, oh, no, this one didn't turn off. No, this one. And then it will walk you. You probably don't have those issues now, but that was my favorite thing. Because I would have never watched TV otherwise.
I have an even older one. It's called Apple Talk. The original networking system that Apple came up with allowed everything to be connected to everything else, had self-discovery and registration on the network. So when Motorola was a totally Apple facility, because we were making the 68,000 chips for the Apple computers, you could, when you got a printer, you just plugged it into the network. It took Ethernet 5 to 10 years to get to the same level as Apple Talk. So that was the first one. The second one is the Palm Pilot with graffiti. Was going to be my number 2.
Okay. Did you say Apple Talk? That's the name of the product? Okay, I'm going to.
Apple, yeah, right, because you never hear about it. It was the networking system that Apple had. Again, this is late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, sure.
Because it just worked.
Okay, so the next question is 3 traits of successful product managers.
I think we hammer those to death a lot, you know. So, like I said, to me, the communication skills, the confidence, and then the willingness to learn. I think that just come down.
So mine was the balance between business success and customer success. How are you making a product that the customer can be successful with, as well as making money for the organization? You're as a product manager, you're the business leader, and so you got to make sure that they're both of them. You have to have focus. You have to have advocacy and understanding of the customers, both the little C customer, the customer you saw last week, as well as the big C customer, the market, that you can go from what does the market need to here's how it's going to be used in this specific situation. So you have to do that broad, have that broad perspective, and you have to have the understanding of the possibility of technology. You don't have to you got to understand technology, but you're also looking forward. So you got to be able to see where this could go, and because you're going to be leading engineers on this, and they're not going to want to be led. You know, when an engineer wants to do something, they just do it. When they don't want to do something, they say, give me a business case. And so you won't know how funny that is until you're in the middle of that someday in the future, but you're going to have to make that case to an engineer.
That's such a great point about when you said engineers don't want to be led. I've never really thought about it that way. So I guess that's where all the angst stems from.
Yep, that's all the angst. Yep. Yep.
And the last question is, it's a little controversial, but do you think really great product managers are born or made?
Made.
Made. There's a, no.
Yeah.
So, and just so you know, there's only one Steve Jobs, okay? You're not it, just to say. So don't be a jerk, you got to listen to, and because I've had managers that thought they were Steve Jobs.
Yeah. I never thought I was going to be a product manager.
Okay.
No idea. When I went to college, I didn't even know that a product manager existed. And then just the career kind of took me there. And so, yep.
Yeah, made.
Made. Okay. Cool. That was the end of our event. So let's give a huge round of applause for Tim and Silvia. And both of them will be here for a few minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And yeah, thank you so much. You can.
I have.
Sure. Of course.
I have two things that I want to say. The first one is, because it started happening already, is if you want a LinkedIn connection, don't just send us a thing, just introduce yourselves and then say, hey, I'm part of the IIT product management team, or whatever, I was in your call, or I saw your biography, because otherwise we reject them all because we don't know who people are, so I'm sorry that we are kind of like, but, so, and I think it's good practice anyway to say, hey.
It's not just for us.
Yeah, it's just for anybody that you can connect. Hey, this is who I am and why I want to connect to you. Hey, I like your profile description, or I heard about you from so-and-so, whatever it is. I think it's just good practice in general to do that. And then the other one is be open with your careers. You have no idea where your career is going to take you. But if you're willing to continue to learn and invest in yourself, I mean, look at what Tim, all the studies, he's a forever learner. I ended up in a secure job, and I needed to have that credibility. So that's why I did the CISSP, because I'm like, I'm not a secure, super guru person, but the people in my team were, and I had other, capabilities that I brought to the role, but I also needed to have some credibility. So, and I never knew I was going to be in that role. So just continue to grow and learn, and then you don't know where your career is going to go. And that's what makes it so fun,
She said it best.
Being open to serendipity, I guess.
Yes,
Yeah.
and sometimes you might even get a role that you think is a side role, and that happened to me. I ended up in this role, and I learned so much in that role that I was really upset that I ended up there. And then it made me a better person in my next role. So you just never know. And I worked for the Motorola Solutions for 38 years. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I know it's a long drive. Barrington is a long.
Sure. Yeah.
But thanks for taking the time out of your schedule to be here and
Happy
talk
to
to
do
our
it.
students.
No, we're thanks.
I'm happy to walk these streets again.
For sure.
Be successful in your career. So
Right.
we can.
Thank you so much.